Hi everybody, Brian from Steeda.com, here today to show you an installation video on a very popular item for the 2015 and up F-150. Now this is a leveling kit made by ReadyLIFT that's going to level out the front of the truck or bring the front of the truck up about 2¼ inches. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to Steve.
Okay, today we're going to be installing the ReadyLIFT 2¼ inch lift. It's 2 aluminum brackets that sit on top of the spring. They raise the vehicle body and give it a more level stance. We're going to be removing the nut for the upper ball joint, the nut for the outer tie rod, the nut for the sway bar. We're going to be removing the dust cap and the nut holding the half shaft. We're going to be taking all the bolts that hold the mounting hardware for these brake lines and electrical and vacuum line. Also, I'm going to be taking the ABS line disconnected from the factory wiring harness to facilitate a little bit extra clearance so we're not tensioning the ABS line to the point where it might get damaged. Then we're going to take the 3 nuts that hold the strut assembly to the shock tower and the 2 nuts holding the bottom of the shock assembly. Okay, we're going to get started on it. I've got an 8mm socket. I'm going to be taking the ABS line off. It's just a little step bolt. And then I'm going to be using a 10mm socket to take the 2 brake lines loose. Now I'm going to be separating all the lines from their holders. ABS line, this is a vacuum hose, and this is the brake line. So I'm going to disconnect the vacuum line. It just pulls off, it's very tight. That's the vacuum line that you pull off. Okay, I'm going to be taking this dust cap off. And you're going to be using a 13mm socket to take the half shaft off. So now I'm going to start taking the upper ball joint off. Okay, if it starts spinning on you, just get a 8mm wrench just to hold it. I'm going to take it almost all the way off and just hold on. I'm going to take the rest of the nuts off, and then I'm going to be supporting the whole arm because it gets quite heavy and a little bit cumbersome. So now I'm going to do the sway bar. Okay, with this nut for the upper ball joint and the sway bar nut, I use a 17mm ratcheting wrench. You don't need a ratcheting wrench, but it sure does make the job a lot easier. Now for the outer tie rod end, it's a 21mm. I got lucky, it came loose by itself. This truck's brand new. If you have a vehicle that has some miles on it, the tapered corner goes into the aluminum housing and it gets locked in there. All you have to do is hit this edge right here with a hammer and it'll dislodge it. That's a trick of the trade. Now we're going to be taking away the nuts that hold the shock in place. All right, okay, so we're going to take the 3 upper nuts off. Again, I'm using an 18mm ratcheting wrench, but you can use a regular wrench. This will take a little bit longer. Okay, so now I have the whole assembly, it's loose. Before I do anything more, I'm going to mark this so I know which is the outside. And the reason it'll become apparent shortly. Okay, now I'm going to support this whole assembly, finish taking this nut off, and then swing the whole assembly out. Now this is the part where you might need another person. You have to pry up on the arm, and you have to pry down on the lower arm. Okay, there you have the whole assembly. Okay, we're going to be installing this piece, the lift kit on top, and it's going to raise the studs up quite a bit. So you saw the effort I had to give to get this out. Putting it back in with everything is a lot more effort. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drive these studs out. That'll help a little bit. And then we'll put it back together again, and you just draw it tight with the nuts. Now the only other thing we got to do, you have to collapse the spring, and then you have to rotate this top plate 180 degrees. So where it says out is on this side here. Okay, I've marked it 180 degrees. I'm going to hold the shock so it doesn't rotate. And I'm going to move. Okay. I compressed the springs to relieve tension on the upper plate, rotated it 180 degrees. All right, I'm going to drive these studs out. You're going to be careful you hit it squarely on the head and not damage any of the threads. do the sway bar, reattach the sway bar. This is, I'm going to reattach the vacuum line that goes on these two fittings. Now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to reattach all the lines I took off earlier. I'm reattaching the brake lines, the vacuum line, and the ABS line. Again, the brake line is a 10mm socket on these 2 points, and the ABS line is an 8mm socket. And then put all the clips back in. They just push in, lock in place, plastic pieces. Now I'm going to go ahead and reattach the clip to the factory wiring harness. And just stick it up there and reattach it. All right. Now I'm going to go ahead and tighten the 3 upper nuts. Again, I'll be using an 18mm ratchet wrench. 2. Now I'm going to tighten the lower shock. We're going to reattach the outer tie rod in. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and reattach the half shaft with the nut there. Okay, this is a 13mm socket. The 2 bottom nuts, they go to 110. This is a sway bar end link. I'm going to torque that to 40 foot-pounds. Okay, this is the lower shock mounting nuts. It gets torqued to 110. Okay. Okay. And then over here, we're going to torque the axle nut to 20. All right. The upper ball joint gets torqued to 85. Okay. Then we reinstall the dust cover.